Yes, sir.
I guess kind of more of a comment. You had mentioned that you would basically just tell the Congress to have the Federal Reserve keep inflation between 0 and 2%. But the problem is that those numbers are entirely cooked. They're completely wrong. The government currently says we have inflation of something like 2%, which is just a complete lie. And so the cost of living inflation is, depending on how you gauge it, maybe 12 to 15% price inflation. But then things like Social Security are only paid out at the indexed 2% rate. So that is how the Social Security debt, as you like, if you'd like to say it that way, is being paid, because the checks are worth less and less. They go not nearly as far. And so ultimately those unfunded liabilities will be funded by the destruction of the dollar. And basically the value sucked away from anyone holding dollars and anyone saving. So I guess overall my comment is basically that I feel very strongly that the fundamental implications of a fiat monetary system have to be addressed, because in my view, it's the root of the whole financial crisis that we're facing now. This whole tsunami of bad debt and derivatives and all this stuff. So if I had one thing to say, first of all, I mean, great presentation. Thank you for coming. But if I had one comment, it would be that I really strongly feel that has to be addressed. The fiat monetary system is the root of many of the evils that you're talking about tonight.
Thank you. And you know, I need to learn more about the gold standard. I know that Larry White, Lawrence White, an economist, had a paper recently on Cato's website about is the gold standard still the gold standard of monetary systems. That is one of the many things that I need to read, frankly, yet. And so I should be up on it more than I am, quite frankly. But first of all, the government is not claiming 2% inflation. Right now it's running in the high 4s, I believe, because I just heard today that they have bumped Social Security payments up. I want to say 4.9%, but it's the highest in 20 years that they've increased Social Security. So they're basically saying that the inflation rate over the past year has run at about 5%. So they're not claiming 2%. Now, I do agree that sometimes I scratch my head, and I think the government has an incentive to understate inflation. And sometimes I listen to what they say and I think, it seems a little light based on what I see. But I haven't, you know, I don't audit it, I don't know. You may be right. I'll stand here and say that I think a dash of humility in a minor party candidate is a becoming thing, having been one 4 times now. And I don't know all, and I'm not omniscient, and nobody is. You may be right, but I think that there's probably no perfect system. We'll come right down to it. But I just think that as long as we have, I don't think that we're about to switch to some sort of hard money system here in the United States, looking at the reality of the situation. But I do think that they need to clearly tell the Federal Reserve, you maintain the purchasing power of that currency. Forget the interest rates, forget the unemployment rate, let them go where they go. Those will head lower over the long term, as long as you maintain the value of the dollar. And they can state that clearly, give them the heave-ho. Ben Bernanke can't keep it between 0 and 2% per year. There's the Salida.
Further questions, comments, observations, arguments? Well, if not, I'll go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you think there's an intrinsic flaw in government in that elected officials are given incentive to move towards government control, you know, kind of the if you have a hammer, all your problems look like nails kind of philosophy, and that even if someone's elected, or when they're elected, or even when they campaign, their platform is left or right-leaning libertarian, when they leave office, they might be, you know, statist almost. Does that seem like an intrinsic flaw in just, you know, human reactions to government?
Bob Barr told a story last night, I believe it was last night, at Newport News, where some new congressman, there used to be a Senator Cotton, I believe, from New Hampshire, and he came up to a newly elected congressman and said, smell the marble on Capitol Hill. Can you smell the marble? No, can't do it. Can't smell the marble. And he says, good, because he says, when you smell marble, sure. I mean, it's the public, James Buchanan's public choice theory, where people get involved in government and they benefit from the expansion of government, and it's going to affect their decisions. There's no question about that. What it ultimately comes down to is a public that is going to care enough to monitor that situation and make sure that they send people who, the part of the term limits argument. You got to move them out every so often, because otherwise they'll stay there and continue to spend more the longer they stay there. So, but ultimately, the American people have to have the philosophical strength to say, no, that's enough. We want people who are going to not just advocate for, but vote for limited government in these positions. And actually, at the end of the day, it's the American people who are letting them get away with it, and the American people who think they're benefiting from it, seeing the good that's done without seeing the hidden costs. And that we need to continue to talk about if people recognize that.
Further questions, comments? If not, I will ask one of the several that I can ask you. Given that you have discounted the likelihood that you will be elected as the next United States Senator from Virginia, what would you consider victory? What are the things which you're looking where you can say the Redpath campaign, given that you were not elected, what would be the signs to say the Redpath campaign was a success past being elected? What would you like?
I'm not big on quantitative goals. I think, first of all, that the fact that the Libertarian Party now has had a candidate for U.S. Senate in Virginia, I think, is a step forward for the Libertarian Party. There's that. I would like to see a sizable increase in my vote total versus 7 years ago. That would be considered a success. Certainly, more members of the Libertarian Party. I think that I'm more in terms of, and I know some people find this not satisfying, but the qualitative aspects. I mean, right now, this sounds kind of wimpy, perhaps in certain respects, but it would be, I think it would be a big deal for the Libertarian Party when there's not a Libertarian candidate in a race for people to say, geez, I wish there'd been a Libertarian candidate in there. I miss not having a Libertarian in there. And I think that in and of itself would be a big step forward for us to have the public think that something was missing when there's not a Libertarian candidate in there. But of course, I'd like to win. I mean, somebody asked me recently, they said, if you were elected to the United States Senate, would you quit your job? I said, well, yeah, it's a 6-year gig, I think I would.